Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This video is going to go a little differently. School has really sidetracked my reading, but I have been slowly chipping away at my next big review. A deeply enthralling first installment of a fantasy series that many claim to be one of the most challenging out there. However, I have been reading in the meantime, books that I've enjoyed a lot and I want to share with you guys, but ones that I don't have a lot to say about. So I'm sort of just going to smush them all in here. I wanted to really talk about the themes and ideas that really stuck out to me from these books. And if they resonate with you, make sure to check them out. So stick around if books about a post-apocalyptic future, a memoir from the creator of one of the biggest companies out there, and a classic Victorian novel with awesome characters interests you. First off, we'll start with A Canticle for Leibowitz, since that's the book I have the most to say about. First published in 1959, this book chronicles the 1,000-year journey of humanity as they try and rebuild from a nuclear war. Now, if my university professor is watching this video, please click away. We were supposed to read this book for my science fiction English class, and I didn't read a single page of it. I know most people can agree that there's something about school that just sucks the joy of reading right out of you. It's one of the biggest reasons why I think people don't read more. So, let this part of the video be my ultra late submission for that class. Since I don't like seeing unread books on my shelf, I decided to pick this up and give it a try. I'm really thankful that I did. I really enjoyed it. However, it was very nerve-wracking by how eerie the parallels to reality were. This book is over 60 years old and is just as timely as ever, which is quite depressing, come to think of it. The main strength and point of the book as a whole is that it takes place over thousands of years. So it demonstrates the cyclical nature of history and how we don't really learn from our mistakes. Things that were very important in the moment and should be remembered are lost to time. Or worse, the importance of it is washed away. There are multiple instances in here where characters discount the past because it's seen as primitive. The real pitfalls of this kind of thinking are assuming that there's never really anything to learn from the past because either it happened so long ago or because time is always moving forward that we're also advancing as a species. This book shows that that isn't really the case if we're not learning from our past mistakes. One of the interesting ways that this book plays with time is that you're able to see how myths and legends are created in real time. Things that are laughed at by their contemporaries are lauded as a genius by their great-great-great-grandchildren. It really makes you wonder how much of what we do is lost to time, and whether the worldwide or national iconographies that we have today were just considered trivial in their time period. We assign the meanings to things, and this book pokes fun at that. For a novel about nuclear war and mass death, the book is never self-serious. It even has time to be a little whimsical at times. I think this approach works because when things get crazy and the world is crashing around you, what can you do except laugh? The book conveys that helpless tone as characters are forced into situations by people that just won't listen to them. And you understand the frustration of screaming at a brick wall. The book also presented science and religion in an interesting light. Normally, you would think of those two as diametrically opposed, but in here they are much more intertwined and rely heavily on each other. The coming together of this Church of Leibowitz is to maintain and preserve science. They are the last bastions of knowledge in this world that has rid itself of all knowledge, and they take their job very seriously. This comes with decades and even centuries of wisdom and insights into human nature and how the technology should be used. Now, they aren't always the perfect keepers of it. They tend to just hoard the knowledge and store it without really understanding its purpose or its uses. This is where the scientists that eventually come from this preservation of knowledge come in, who have new and interesting ways on how to use it. They can see behind the small box that the church has put the information in. But, as Dr. Ian Malcolm once said,
it didn't require any discipline to attain it. You read what others had done, and you took the next step. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility for it. You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could.
Before.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
the scientists constantly hurtle humanity towards apocalypse without a second thought, and always in the name of progress. They use the church as just a repository of scientific knowledge, as opposed to gathering at least some advice on moral values. This ends up being really bad, as no two scientists can agree on the perfect version of Eden. Granted, different religions can't either, but these scientists have the ability to destroy any chance of getting closer to paradise. The irony is on full display as different groups of people are willing to kill each other and destroy the whole planet in order to prove that their ways of doing things are the best and will cause people the least amount of pain. So, as we ourselves hurtle towards a disaster with AI, a growing climate challenge, and higher tensions with nuclear powerhouses, this book somehow helped bring to light the shaky feeling of dread, helplessness, and anxiety all mixed together in one. I feel like this is why reading is so important. If more people read this book, then maybe we'd have a little more motivation to cooperate. But hey, that's just wishful thinking. The second book I wanted to talk about today was Shoe Dog. Shoe Dog is a memoir from this former CEO and creator of Nike, Phil Knight. The book chronicles the 28-year journey of Nike from initial pipe dream to multi-million-dollar company. The fact that Nike is now a household name and synonymous with athletics really made it interesting to read about its origins and just how many times the company was on the brink of collapsing. Phil Knight never fails to mention just how much luck was involved in the journey, and seeing it all laid out, it's extraordinary that any of it worked. Of course, being a memoir from the guy himself, the book is certainly going to gloss over a lot of details and hardships. It's going to paint Phil Knight in the best of lights, and touching on workplace conditions in the briefest of ways doesn't really help. He might as well have left that part out. However, even with all these things, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't at least somewhat inspired by this book. You really get a sense of Phil Knight's passion for not only the company, but athletics as a whole. While not being a self-help book, nor a guide on how to build a business, not least of which the fact that a lot of the business loopholes used by Phil Knight have probably been patched up by now by the wealthy in order to stay wealthy. The enthusiasm on display is contagious and enough to get you to think about your own life and the own pipe dreams that you have. I wouldn't be surprised to find myself rereading this book in the future if I ever needed a little kick in the butt or motivation to continue my passions. So if you want a very easy and pleasant read and are looking for a little motivation, definitely pick this book up. The last book I wanted to talk about in this video is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. And no, this is not the source material for that horror movie starring Daniel Radcliffe. The novel centers around Walter Hartright and his fateful encounter with the woman in white. Her having escaped from a mental asylum and on the run, Walter is unable to gather more details from her as she disappears into the night. This is the beginning of a pretty great mystery novel. Written from the perspective of multiple character POVs, the characters recall to the best of their knowledge the timeline of events. This keeps the book quite interesting because even though you'll sometimes have to backtrack through events that you've already seen, due to the changing perspectives, it's always interesting. Also, the way that the structure, vocabulary, and grammar change with the varying perspectives is a really nice touch. Now, the highlight of this book is definitely the characters. While Walter is the main character, he gets completely overshadowed by Marion Halcombe. What an awesome character. Someone managed to write a thoughtful, nuanced, and multi-layered female character in the freaking 1860s. And yet, there are still books and movies released today with atrocious attempts. It's mind-boggling. Women did not have nearly the same amount of rights as they do now, and Marion is assuredly a woman of her time. But she never lets the attitudes of the world bring her down or get in the way of how she wants to live her life. She accepts that her status is seen as lower, but she owns it and subverts it as often as she can. She doesn't use it as a crutch, but instead a weapon, and those who overlook her pay for their stupidity. Another of the characters, Count Fosco, seems ripped from an entirely different novel. He's so flamboyant, and he almost doesn't fit with the story being told or the other characters. Thankfully, Wilkie Collins never gets too carried away with what Count Fosco can do, so he remains in the realm of possibility. Speaking of the realm of possibility, however, Wilkie Collins does add elements in here that seem very out of place. Prophetic dream sequences and a last-minute genre change into a sort of spy novel seem out of left field for the very down-to-earth way the novel had been presented thus far. One of the other downsides to this novel is that for as interesting as it is for a book written in the 1860s, it is still a Victorian novel. It's very dry at times, and not a lot will happen for chapters at a time. If you're a character over plot person, you won't mind as much. But describing every single thought flitting through a character's head can get a little meandering at times. Also, the main mystery of the novel is definitely a product of the times. It's hyped up for the entire novel, and for the time period, I'm sure it was a great scandal. But you can't help but think, that's it, reading it now. That's not a knock against the book, but an aspect of reading classics that I find amusing. All in all, it was quite an enjoyable book, and if you're in the mood for reading a classic, this is just as good a place to start as any. So I hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I hope it gave you something to put on your to-be-read list. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the start of my journey into the Malazan Empire.